Silahkan.
Empezamos.
So welcome, everyone. My name is Drolma So I'm going to be leading this course, the Welcome to Tushita from Afar. I'm in the foothills of the Himalayas at Tushita Meditation Center, and it's a very rainy day today. And I rejoice that you are all here. I think it's amazing that we can do this. You know, when I started first playing with computers, it was like in the 80s, I think the early Macs came out, and to envision, you know, like video conferencing was like something that you saw in science fiction cartoons, and now it's real. It's amazing, amazing. And I'm very happy to be here because we are going through such a difficult time in the world. It's very interesting for the Chinese character, you know, their pictures, Chinese characters, and the one for crisis, which is, I feel like what we're in right now. The one for crisis is made up of this, the symbol for not only danger, because that's something that we're all feeling, but also opportunity. So anytime you have something like this, a crisis like this, there's also there's opportunity, because it's a huge change that, you know, I think the world is kind of waking up in some ways to not only, you know, our connectedness, but also our connectedness, you know, in positive ways and negative ways. So it's a very interesting time, and we're happy here at Tushita to be able to do some online talking about the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, because I feel like Buddhism has some very unique techniques and tools that we can use while we're all, you know, homebound, while we have all this time and this space, when our usual distractions of going out and maybe working, you know, socializing are not necessarily available. So now we get to be at home with our minds. So I'm very happy that you're here, that you've, you know, taken this opportunity to learn some new things to work on your mind. So a little bit about me. I'm from the US originally. I've been in India now. This is my 5th year. And I started studying Buddhism full time about 15 years ago. I've been ordained as a nun for 10 years. And I studied psychology, Western psychology, before I became a nun. And then I got a degree in Buddhist studies from Matripa College, which is in Portland, Oregon. Yeah, and then I've been being a nun and, you know, helping out at Dharma centers for a long time now. So I'll be doing the first part of meditation and teaching, and then Felipe, who is under the name registered Tushita, he's my technical support, and he's also going to be leading the guided meditation at the end. So do you want to introduce yourself, Felipe?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Venerable Drolma. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new session of online teachings and meditations in Tushita. I'm Felipe. I'll be leading the guided meditations and helping out Venerable Drolma to sort out the questions that you may have. I really hope, and I'm really excited about this new chapter of doing these things online. I think I've always had the feeling that technology was something that, when used properly, could bring so much benefit to so much people. And having right now 180 people right now in this conference is a clear example of that. I think that we can really use these tools in a very positive way and bring a really good change to the world. So about me, I've been here in Dharamsala, India for the past 4 years almost. And so I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to connect with the rest of the world in this form of online meetings. And so I really hope you all benefit from what we're doing here. And I really appreciate all your enthusiasm and your presence. And now let's leave it to Venerable Drolma to take the teachings. Thank you.
Thanks, Felipe. So Felipe has muted you all, so you can't talk, and I don't think you can even unmute yourself. So we're trying to keep it as simple and quiet as possible until when we get to the question and answer section, and then he will unmute like each person who has a question to ask the question directly. So we'll be able to, everyone will be able to hear your voices. And we found that that worked really well this morning, that we, the person who is asking the question and myself can have a face-to-face dialogue, and you guys can listen in, the rest of you. If there are any technical problems, we don't know whether it's from your side or from our side. So one thing that you can do is that if you can't hear me very clearly, is that you can stop your video, and oftentimes that helps make the bandwidth more available for the audio. Okay, so if that's something you want to do, you can do that if it's a problem. Also know that we're in India, in the not a super developed area, so we just got our electricity back on about an hour ago. So the electricity may go off, but we have backup, so I should still be able to talk to you. It's just you may not see me very well. It may go dark, so don't get scared if it goes dark. It's just the electricity went off again. And then just please be patient, with the technical thing. It's an amazing thing that we can do, but of course it's not been perfected quite yet. So the way this is going to work, we're going to start off with some meditation just to calm us all down. Then I'll do some teaching for about a half hour. Then we'll do some Q&A for about 20 minutes. And then Felipe will do another meditation. And that one will be more guided, specific to what we just talked about. Felipe will put up in the chat a link to our website, which has some texts for downloads, which is actually about a 20-page booklet that has some very introductory information about Buddhism, and that you can refer to it because I will be teaching specifically the topics that are in that book. So you can click on that link and download that maybe before tomorrow. And if you're interested in longer books to maybe read during while we are, during these 2 weeks while we're doing this course, one really good one is called Introduction to Tantra. And it doesn't talk about Tantra until towards the end of the book. In the beginning, it talks a lot about the beginning introduction to Buddhism, which is what I'm going to be talking about. And it's by Lama Yeshe is the name. So it's Introduction to Tantra by Lama Yeshe. Another book that you could consider, maybe you have around, or if you're looking for one, is by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and that's called How to Practice. Okay, that's another really good one. Okay. All right, so let's, one thing that you will learn about Buddhism is that the mind is very important. That the mind is the source of all of our actions, and much of how we think about things really influences everything that we do. And how we interact with people is based on a lot on how we perceive them, how we see them. And we have a lot of control in many ways over our minds. In some ways, we have access to them. Like I can ask you right now to think about an apple, okay? The color and the shape and even the taste and the texture, and you can generate that in your mind, which is really amazing. But at the same time, as soon as you stop thinking about the apple, the mind has really powerful habits that come in, ways of thinking, go right back to. And so Buddhism is a lot about working with this thing that is, changeable, but also in many ways very strong, very powerful. And so one important thing that that we need to do whenever we're starting any kind of an activity is what is our intention? What are we thinking about the activity that we're doing? What is our motivation for what we're doing? So let's start with, getting some calming, um, uh, get into a comfortable position. I'm not going to go into the specifics of meditation posture, but for now, if you can make sure that your back is straight, and it doesn't have to be ramrod, it can be like relaxed, straight, just sitting up. We want this an alertness. So adjust in any way you need to. And your eyes can be either opened or closed. It's just important that you're comfortable so that you can hold still. And then I'd like you to take some really deep breaths. And you can start this by exhaling as much as you can, emptying out your lungs as much as you can, because then that allows you to inhale deeply. And that too helps your body to start to relax. So meditation is a lot about this balance between relaxation and alertness or being awake. So we don't want you falling asleep, but we don't want you distracted very much either. So see if you can't allow your focus to go to the lower part of your body. So your legs and your hips and your stomach. Because we spend so much time in our heads. And if you're feeling any tension, you can let that go, consciously relaxing, whether it's your shoulders or your jaw or your stomach. We respond so much better to difficult situations when we have a relaxed attitude and a calm mind. And then you can bring to mind some of the reasons why you were engaging in this class. What are you hoping to achieve, or what is the purpose of your participation? Why are you here? And usually we think first about how things are going to benefit ourselves. So maybe you're here to improve your well-being, make your life better in some way. And then we can take our intention, our motivation a little wider, knowing that through improving ourselves, through learning to be more calm, to respond in situations well, that we help the others around us. We can be more attentive to their needs, more compassionate, more patient with others. And then we can take it even wider as we learn more about the interdependence of all things. May our practice, may our working on our minds, may our becoming more kind, gentle, wise people spread like the ripples in a pond when a pebble is tossed into it. And then let your body relax again, maybe focusing on your breath, just noticing, not trying to change anything. And bring yourself into this present moment, letting go of any past, any future, right here, right now. Allowing things to just be as they are. And notice how as you relax, your mind slows down a bit. As your body calms, as you sit still, your mind is allowed to rest. It's still moving, but just not as much. Okay. So let's see. So welcome to the Buddhist path of training the mind. I am going to start off talking a little bit about Shakyamuni Buddha's life and a little bit about his awakening, his enlightenment, and also some about what he taught. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover most of today. So it's interesting, the life of Buddha. Buddha, when he was teaching, he didn't talk like these books behind me. I don't know if you can see them, but on either side of the big statue, there are books of about, I don't know, like I think it's about 300 or something books that include all the words of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha that we have had passed down from these 2,600 years. And in those books, you will not find the teaching of the life story of the Buddha that was attributed to him, because for him, it wasn't really important who he was. He wasn't someone who we necessarily, he didn't want us to worship or idolize him. In particular, he wanted us to follow what he learned. So it became important that his teaching be what was presented to the world, not him himself, because for the Buddha, what he taught, he started off as an ordinary human being, just like us. And he was able to figure some things out about life, about the world, that he wanted to share. And so for many years in Buddhist art, it wasn't even the image of a Buddha wasn't even included. It was more his teaching throne that would be shown, or a wheel, what they call a Dharma wheel, which represents the teachings of the Buddha. And so the stories that we get of his life, we have two perspectives. There's a narrative that is kind of like a teaching story for us to look at our own lives. You know, it's a way in which some of the things that the Buddha went through, that we can start to look at our own lives and see parallels, okay, in some ways for our own spiritual journey. And then we can also look at it from the historical perspective. So of course, there's been research that is around, you know, what was India like when at the time of the Buddha, this 2,600 years ago, which was actually around the time of Socrates, if you're familiar with Western philosophy. So BC, of course, BCE, early, before the turn of the century, the millennium. And so the Buddha, at that time, India was not really, many times you'll see in the story they call him a prince. And the reason why he's called Shakyamuni Buddha is because he lived in the city-state, similar to a city-state called the Shakya. And his father and his mother were pretty well off, so they were very comfortable. He had a life of luxury. Um, in the story, it goes that he was pretty protected from the sufferings of life, which for many of us, when we're young children, oftentimes we have a pretty rosy view of the world until we grow up, you know, and we start to see that maybe the world isn't as perfect as we thought when we were young children. And so the Buddha was pretty protected. The story goes that his father really wanted him to follow in his footsteps, be a leader, as well as, you know, just like his father. And the Buddha was ready for that. You know, he was being groomed. He was really good at sports. He had lots of girlfriends. You know, he was all comfortable. He got married, had a son, you know, was following, you know, in the footsteps of his father. And then one day he started to feel some dissatisfaction or some curiosity about the world. And for many of us, when we come to Buddhism, oftentimes we start to feel that way too. Maybe something very serious happens in our life, some illness, or we lose someone we love, or, you know, our plans just don't work out, or we start finding that that the way we've pursued things doesn't have a lot of meaning. And so the Buddha decided that he wanted to explore, right? To leave his home where he was living. And he went out, the story goes, that he left his home, he snuck out, got his chariot driver to take him to the village to see what life was like. And he encountered four really powerful sights, they call them, the four things that he saw. And the first three had to do with, were kind of shocking for him. And I think this was like his wake up call in life, you know. And the first one that he saw was a sick person. He had never seen someone who was very ill, which is kind of hard to believe, but apparently that's the story, how the story goes. But you know, you can see the teaching message in there of when we first start to encounter some of the more difficult aspects of life. And we're, you know, experiencing it now in many ways, you know, with this pandemic, that it's, you know, getting sick is becomes something much more life-threatening, you know. And then the other sight he saw was someone who was aging. And he was pretty shocked by this because what he found out was that everybody goes through this, right? Everybody starts to lose their sight, starts to lose their hearing, becomes very weak, is no longer beautiful and, you know, and energetic. And that was like, you know, kind of surprising for him. And then the last one, which was most shocking, is that everybody dies, that we have this, you know, this huge thing sort of looming in front of us, that we all sort of are aware of, but don't really think about a lot. You know, like death is something that happens to everybody else. You know, you hear about it, but it isn't really, for many of us, it's not in our face unless we've, you know, gone through a really serious, you know, life-threatening incident. And then it becomes like, oh, this is actually real. So for the Buddha, he was like, what, you know, what is going on here? And isn't this a horrible situation? You know, this is part of our lives, you know, and everyone goes through this. And what is going on? How can we work with this? How can we deal with this? And so another aspect of historically what was happening in India at the time of the Buddha was that the caste system was starting to become more prominent. And the Vedas, which are the holy books of one aspect of Hinduism, were becoming more, you know, it was the institutionalized religion at the time. And the power was very much held in the priestly caste, in the Brahmanic class, okay? And so there were a certain number of rebellious people, like sort of revolutionaries, who were wanting to access like spiritual experience on their own. And so they were sort of breaking away from this institutionalized religion. And they were wandering around India, and they were particularly known for their yellow robes. Okay, so they wore yellow robes. They were like holy people. And there weren't many women at the time who were doing this because it was not very safe for them to do it. So they were, in general, they were like holy men. And this was actually a very noble way to live your life, to go around and give up all your possessions and search for a spiritual, connection, a spiritual experience. And in particular, liberation, freedom from the suffering that the Buddha had found. So he also, the fourth site that he saw was these wandering sadhus, one of these wandering holy people. And he said, that's the way, that's the way for me to find out how to help my family, how to help all the people that I love, how to get myself free from the suffering. And so he left his home and he went to become one of these men who were traveling and developing their spirituality. And the first teachers that he studied with two very prominent teachers. He studied meditation, and he was already pretty good at meditation. He had had some early experiences in his life of being able to calm his mind and having some mystical, spiritual experiences without any training. And he thought, oh, this is the way, this is the way that I'm going to get free of this suffering. And so he became very, very good. He trained his mind. He concentrated very well. And the system that he was learning from these particular teachers was bringing him into more and more refined or subtle or deeper meditative experiences. So taking you in your meditation, taking you away from the senses. So no longer interacting with the world. It was more like, what do I, working with the mind and be making the mind more and more refined. So some of these, what they call meditative absorptions, are becoming, absorbed in things like light and nothingness and things like that. And he became very, very good at it. But what he found was, no matter how much he removed himself mentally from the world and how much he trained his mind to become totally absorbed in these very subtle kinds of ways of meditating, he would come back. He would come out of these meditative states and he would feel like nothing had actually changed with his mind. Okay, maybe he was more focused and maybe he was calmer, but as far as his habitual thinking, that hadn't really changed, and it hadn't really decreased his suffering all that much. So he left those meditation masters, and he decided to try to deny his body completely. So meaning that he was, he didn't he didn't wear many clothes. He allowed himself to stay outside, subject to the elements. He didn't eat very much. He didn't drink very much. So he was what they call an ascetic. So really denying the body, giving up everything. Okay. And you'll see in His Holiness Temple here in Dharamsala, hopefully you can come one day, there's a statue, and you can look this up, there are pictures of this, of a statue where you see the Buddha and he has all his ribs showing. And so his ribs represent the fact that he was only eating, they say, like something like 3 grains of rice a day. So he was living on very little. So one day, and he did this for a long time, he did it for like 6 years, they say. I don't know if we know exactly, but a long time. And one day he was very thirsty. He was crawling to the river, and he realized that he was so weak that he couldn't work with his mind anymore. It wasn't actually getting anywhere as far as getting his, him anywhere in terms of helping his mind, decreasing his suffering. And so, and he met up with a woman actually who offered him some food, very good, eat. I have one teacher who said she actually saved his life. And he realized at that point what is the first meaning of something you will hear in Buddhism, which is called the middle way. Okay, so the Buddha's teachings talk about that denying, giving everything up, letting go of everything, uh, not even, taking care of your basic needs is one way, and that one didn't work. And neither did his life of luxury, having access to everything, and, all the good food and all the parties and, all this, all the sports and all this kinds of things, that didn't really satisfy him either. So this first meaning of the middle way is finding this balance between those two. Okay, so in order to work on our minds, we have to find a way in which we aren't totally indulging all the time in these sense pleasures, but at the same time, we don't totally deny everything either. There is enjoyment in life. And it's not a bad thing to be healthy and happy and, and have well-being. And actually, if we're going to work with these habits of our mind to decrease our suffering, we have to be, relatively healthy. So let's see. So he left, though he was studying, or he was practicing with 5 ascetics who would later become his first disciples, his first students. And he went to a place called Bodh Gaya, which is in also in the northern part of India, in Bihar. And he sat underneath a tree and made a decision that he wasn't going to get up until he had figured this out, until he had figured out the solution. How is he going to get free of this liberation, free from the suffering? And so he sat underneath the Bodhi tree and he applied his powerful, powerful mind, all this concentration that he had been developing. And he started to really look at our situation, to look very carefully at what is, the nature of the world that I am living in? What is this suffering that I am trying to get free from? What is its nature, and what is the cause of it? And how can I, what do I need to do? Okay. And he figured it out. Basically, he became a Buddha in that. Actually, they say it was in one night. He had all these powerful, powerful spiritual realizations, and he figured out the way to do it. And it was a powerful experience for him. And he felt like it was so monumental and so opposite to what people normally think as the way to live your life and the way to be happy, that he didn't feel like anyone would understand what he was talking about. And it's very interesting, because even to this day, with all of our scientific research, with all of our sophistication and our civilization, still many of the concepts that Buddhism teaches are like opposite to what mainstream beings, people, think will bring us happiness, think will decrease our suffering. And so so at first he wasn't going to teach. He was like, no way, I'm not going to go there, people won't understand. But one of the things that we have to recognize, and one of the basic tenets of Buddhism, is this idea of interconnection. This idea of how we all influence each other, and so that we are the product of all these causes and conditions. So the arising of a Buddha, of someone who is awakened, someone who has recognized the reality in this way, someone who has been able to train their mind, is not just him. Okay, it's impossible for a Buddha to arise in the world without all the other conditions that come together to support him. Okay, and so for him to just say, oh no, I'm going to keep it all to myself, kind of denies that reality, because all the other beings that also existed in that time went to support the fact that he actually achieved what he achieved. Okay, so so for him to just say, you know, oh, I'm going to go off and, you know, just enjoy my enlightenment, was denying that reality. So he decided, okay, I am going to teach, and so who am I going to teach? So his first, yeah, he wanted to teach his old teachers. He wanted to go back to those two meditation masters that he had learned from first, but it didn't really, they were gone actually. They had passed away and he couldn't teach them anymore. So he went back, he walked from Bodh Gaya to a place called Sarnath, which is, I was looking it up, and it'd take about a couple weeks to walk there. It was pretty far away. And I have a map. Let me see if I can show that to you. So this is a map of the Ganges River Valley in northern, it's like northeastern India, and you'll see the Ganges as a river is labeled there, and you see where Nepal. So he was actually born in the southwestern, what is now the southwestern part of Nepal. And you can see the one thing um, that is labeled there as Varanasi, and actually Varanasi is between Bodh Gaya and Sarnath, where he taught. Sarnath was the first teaching that he gave. So he basically started off in northern, you know, way far northern India at the foothills of the Himalayas, and then walked all the way, you know, through his wanderings and his studying, past Varanasi, you know, further east, and then he went back to the people that he was teaching. And his first teaching that he gave to them was called the Four Noble Truths. So these are the Four Noble Truths. So he taught, after giving this first teaching, he taught for until he was about 80 years old. So he was around 35, I think, around his early 30s when we of course don't have any written records, but that's what is generally known, that he was in his early 30s. And so we have, like, you know, 40 some years of teachings from him, which is pretty amazing. We don't often have that from the beings that visit our world. We don't necessarily have that many years of teachings available to us. So this first teaching, the Four Noble Truths, is considered the foundation or the basis of his teaching. And when we're approaching the Four Noble Truths, it's important that we see ourselves as like a patient. Okay, so someone who is sick. So this seeing ourselves as, okay, let's see, seeing ourselves as a sick person, and that the Buddha is like a doctor. So whenever we go to the doctor, we talk to the doctor first about our symptoms. You know, where does it hurt? How are we sick? You know, what is it that we want to be fixed? And it's the doctor who diagnoses the cause, okay? Who says, okay, this is what I think is wrong with you, and this is what we need to fix in order to get rid of the symptom. And the second noble truth then becomes about what is the cause of our difficulties. And we'll talk a little bit more about specifically what we mean by suffering, because it isn't just those three sights that he saw, although that's a big part of it. And so that we have to find out, he has to diagnose the cause. And then the third one, the truth of cessation. So cessation means stopping, okay? Stopping one, you know, the cause, and stopping, therefore stopping the symptoms. So the third noble truth is talking about the fact that it can be stopped, that the suffering can be stopped by stopping the cause. And then the fourth noble truth talks about the path, truth of the path. So if you've studied any Buddhism, and I'm sure many of you have already, you've probably heard of these four noble truths. And the fourth noble truth is actually the eightfold path. You may have heard of it identified as that. Okay. So the first one, the truth of suffering, we talk about three different types of suffering. Okay. So yeah, 15 more minutes. I think no, not that much. Let me figure out my time first. So yeah, maybe 5 more minutes, and then we'll do some questions so that we can try to keep on our time. Okay, so the truth of suffering. The first one, we can break down all of our difficulties, and suffering is a very difficult word anyway, and it's not always a good translation. Unfortunately, when Buddhism was first translated into English, a lot of they didn't have, of course, an awareness of the language necessarily, and how the two languages, correlated. And so the word in Sanskrit is dukkha, and it's very similar, I think, in Pali. And Pali was the language that the Buddha, a dialect of Pali was the language that the Buddha originally spoke in. And the teachings were passed down orally for about 200 or 300 years, for a long time, before they were actually written down. And they were written down first in this Pali language, and then they were later on, they were also written down in the Sanskrit language. So this this term dukkha pervades, it means not only this idea of pain, what we think of as like physical pain, like breaking a leg or something like that, but also this emotional pain, which relates to like dissatisfaction. So the fact that our lives are filled with a constant sort of craving for satisfaction, a constant like wanting something more, like never being happy with the way things are, never having a sense of contentment and calmness. Like we have to work very hard to generate that sense of contentment, because our lives are very much filled with things are never right, things never go well. Okay. And so when we go into this truth of suffering, when we go into it deeply, it's so that we can start to look at what is our situation, what is it that we're dealing with, and how can we transform this. And you will see that actually the main focus for Buddhism is the mind. It's is that is the source of a lot of our difficulties. And we spend a lot of time trying to fix our external circumstances, trying to see things as different, and not see things differently, but try to change. We try to get the perfect apartment, and we tried to find the perfect relationship, and we try to arrange our lives, our careers, and we spend a lot of time trying to fix the external world instead of working on our own perceptions of what is already there. And actually, according to Buddhism, that would have a lot bigger impact on what we deal with, okay, and how we deal with life, and actually increases our level of happiness. So suffering we're talking about is not only physical suffering, respond to pain, but also this emotional suffering. And the suffering of change talks about the fact that all those things, many of those things that we feel like are the source of our happiness, like pleasurable experiences, like a spa treatment, or being warm even, or we're constantly looking for comfort, for interesting and exciting experiences. And what happens, the suffering of change, is the fact that those always end. The nature of anything that comes into existence through causes and conditions is the fact that it will end, that it will stop. And that's a type of suffering. This idea that we're gonna eventually, things are gonna go away. No matter what it is that brings us happiness, it's gonna change. People change all the time. We change all the time. Things break constantly. I mean, look at our world. Who could ever have imagined that we would be stuck, in our homes, not able to go out, and that this is happening all over the world. Everybody is like saying, no, stay home, and that's a huge change, and it's taking us out of our comfort zone. Okay, and now we have to adjust to that. It's amazing. So this is also something we don't have any control over. It's not something anybody chose. We don't choose for to have to stay in. We don't choose to have to not have access to our family and our friends, only through, now we have technology, and even that isn't necessarily reliable. But it's just this suffering of change, this impermanence in our world. So this is something, how do we deal with this? And actually Buddhism has these great techniques and these great tools, so that no matter what our external circumstances are, we can learn to be happy and we can learn to be content. And the third one, all pervasive suffering, has to do with this, that we are subject to these things out of our control. And in particular, all pervasive suffering has to do with the sickness, aging, and death that we don't have any control over. So maybe we'll stop there for this one, and we'll go into the truth of the other ones tomorrow. I'll catch us up tomorrow, because we're going to go more deeply into each one of these anyway. This is sort of the basis of the course. So if you have some questions at this point, if you can type into the chat, so find your chat, it's the little thought bubble. If you go to your chat and you type in your questions, then Felipe will unmute you and say out loud please ask your question, and then you'll be spotlighted, so you'll be the one in speaker view, so we'll all see you, and then we can talk. So you can ask your question directly and I'll answer it.
Okay, so while everyone is typing their questions, we have already one person that had a question. So I'm going to unmute Robin Dev. You can now ask your question out loud. Venerable Drolma.
Hello.
Robin?
Hello. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to ask a simple question, like, how do you train your mind to get around the sufferings that are going on in the world, right? Like, there's a video circulating of a boy who was about to die in Syria out of the bombings, and he said that I'm going to tell God everything. Then there is another video of a girl in Balochistan who's saying that against the government, she's saying that we have to go for jihad just because the government is so repressive against them. And then our very own religion, like I'm also a Buddhist, and in Burma, in Myanmar, the Rohingya Muslims are being massacred by the Buddhist majority country. So how do I get my mind around these things, and how do I explain to myself that what is going on is like okay, or like how do I react to it? How do I
Oh,
get my mind around this thing?
yeah. How do you deal with this really, really difficult situations that are happening in the world? And so different people, of course, are going to respond in different ways to these things. So it's a matter of looking at your own response. And my first, technique that we have in Buddhism that we talk about is developing compassion. Okay, so compassion for the people who are suffering, as well as the people who have these mistaken beliefs that somehow killing others is the source of their happiness, that somehow by wiping out, killing Muslims or jihad is somehow a way in which they will make themselves have more happiness. That this is a mistaken view, because it doesn't bring happiness. It brings suffering. It hurts others. It hurts themselves. And so we can have compassion for those people that they're in their minds are so in such a place. I mean, I can't even imagine. I went through a really difficult situations when I was in graduate school. My roommate was raped, and it was someone who, it wasn't a date rape situation, which is horrible in itself, but it was a situation where it was a stranger who had, cut off the power and the phone lines and snuck into our house. I mean, it was a very, very violent, very horrible situation, and this person had raped quite a few people before he was caught. And just trying to think about the mind of someone who is in that situation. Now, we have compassion for the people who are suffering. It's easier to have a compassion for the people who are, experiencing the violence, but to also have compassion for the people who are perpetrating the violence is very difficult. But it's for us, instead of, feeling hopeless, instead of feeling that these things are out of control, that we can have a view that compassion is not only about empathy, feeling that that their minds are in such a horrible state, but it's also wanting to remove that suffering, wanting to stop that suffering, and that there is hope that these people are not always going to think that way, and that we ourselves, by working on our minds, by removing the anger, the hatred, the prejudice, that we can actually influence the world, becoming, making it a better place by developing this compassion for them, and then not responding in the same way. So that's how, that's the Buddhist response to it, is compassion and working on your mind. It's
Okay.
not easy. No one said it was easy. Yeah, and it takes time, and it's a different view. Like I said, Buddhism is not, mainstream.
No,
It's not go out and, kill everybody who's killing us.
In Myanmar, the established leaders of Buddhism teachings in there, like established, like we call Rinpoche and all, established religious leaders, they are propagating violence. So I used to think that my religion, Buddhism, is the best religion in the world. And then, as and when I started to experience these things, I have my mindset has changed. And now I also asked there was this thing, puja sort of a thing in my house, and we had called a lama, Guruji, Mime, and I asked him, like, I don't understand what you're saying. And why do you want, like, how can you expect me to follow a religion which I don't even understand? And he was, he could not respond to me in a proper way, and I was thrown out of my house by my parents. But somehow didn't get any answers. Like, I don't understand, being a Buddhist, I don't understand the scriptures. I don't understand. I only know Om Mani Padme Hum and one another, this thing. And other than that, I don't know anything about my religion. So, and as in I saw Myanmar, I saw Sri Lanka, Sinhalese Buddhist against the Tamilians, and they wiped out the entire population. So how do I take? How do I accept my religion to be propagating such a thing in other countries like in Myanmar and in Sri Lanka? So that really
Yeah,
confuses me.
yeah, yeah. I think it's something you have to work with. You have to really analyze because religions are people too, ordinary beings. And so we have to understand that there's no such thing as a pure form of a religion, and it's people's minds and how they work with it. Okay, so let's
Okay.
take another, yeah, let's take another question. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to unmute Lucy Pelaez, so you can now ask your question out loud. Give me 1 second, I'm unmuting you. There we go. So Lucy, you can now ask your question out loud.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. So yeah, I've been these last years trying to follow this path of getting closer to Buddhism and changing some preconcepts and mindsets I've been having all my life. So my question is like, how does it work with living our normal lives, living our families to engage into this path of Buddhahood?
So you said leaving your normal life? Is that what you said? Leaving? So, okay. Yeah, and I don't necessarily think you have to leave physically, right? You don't necessarily have to, move out and move to India or anything like that. You could, of course, if that's your path, but you don't necessarily have to do that. They talk. It's interesting. I heard one teacher talking about retreat, and that retreat isn't necessarily physically going anywhere, but it is changing your mindset, changing the way in which you view things. So we can start to leave our habitual and our usual ways of interacting with others without necessarily physically leaving them. Okay. And the way to do that, for me, when I was in your situation and still like living at home is, or with family, that sort of thing, was that I did have to carve out, like maybe an hour a day or 2 hours a day, depending on what when you can do it, in which I would focus on my own mind and on my own spirituality and on my own growth. So in some ways, I did leave, I left my, the religion that I was raised in, but I didn't leave. I'm still very, very close to my family, my sisters and my brother and my parents. But psychologically, I have a different worldview from them. But it's interesting because Buddhism isn't against love and compassion and not harming and all those things that I think are common to humanity. So it's not like I rejected them in any way. It was more like I found my own path. So in some ways, finding your own path is actually leaving without necessarily having to physically leave. But you do have to, I think, separate yourself at least for some time in the day in which you are working on your own mind, because our relationships tend to develop habits in our relationships that keep us kind of stuck in our usual ways of thinking. So it's important that you do have some time in which is just for you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Another one?
Now I'm going to unmute Gil. You had a question from His 6-year-old son is asking a question, or her 6-year-old son. Gil, are you there? You can ask your question around her. There you go.
Hi.
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 I sometimes get upset
Right.
when I have to write.
When you have to write?
Yes, and he was really intrigued by Buddha's story, and he was asking why did he leave when he lived such a comfortable life. And Arjun over here, as you know, we're in England and we're on lockdown, so he's out of school, and I'm homeschooling. And when it came down to doing his regular writing, he struggles quite a bit. So, and he starts crying, and he will say things like, "Oh, this is the worst thing. I don't want to do it." And we try to do everything. So he listened to the whole story. I was going to do the course by myself, but he just came and sat down with me, and he would like you to help him with that.
Oh. So, do you get mad when you write?
Yeah, I sometimes get really mad.
Yeah, you get really mad. Is that because writing isn't fun? Is that why?
Yeah.
Do you know, have you ever looked at writing as like coloring or as like drawing?
Not really.
Because that's what writing is. It's making pictures, isn't it? It's making pictures with your pen or your pencil. Yeah. Yeah. So, when you get mad, do you run away? Do you like take off from your desk or something and hide from your mom?
I hide from my dad.
You hide from your dad? Yeah. One time.
Matters who gets really the most angriest. It matters who does that.
And does getting mad feel good? Do you like it when you get mad?
No.
No, you don't, do you? So it would be more fun, wouldn't it, if you pretended like your writing was like drawing a picture, and then if you laughed instead of getting mad, because laughing feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the Buddha, he said, you know, a lot of, you know, what cause our problems has to do more with how we think about things. You know, like if you see writing as something that makes you mad, then it's going to make you mad, of course, and you won't want to do it. But if you see it differently, if you see it as more like fun, yeah. Did you have any other questions?
That's the only one.
That was the only one. Okay.
And he'll try
Thank
to join in tomorrow again, because he really did enjoy her story.
Great, great.
And he'll do the meditation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I might.
Whatever you want to do. Yeah, if it feels good, that's why you do it. If it makes you happy. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. One more question and then we'll do some meditation. Okay, I'll do one more. So I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, Jyotsna. You can now ask one of your questions out loud, please.
Good evening. My question was that, you know, sometimes similar kind of situations causing suffering come into your life again and again. So is it that they are for a particular reason? You know, maybe like it's like being cheated in a relationship, then being cheated in an investment. So again and again, being cheated. So why is it that, you know, a similar kind of suffering comes again and again?
Well, we get into, okay, so anything that happens and even our experience of what happens is the result of causes and conditions, right? So the conditions and the causes come together for us to have certain experiences, right? So according to Buddhism, we're not completely in control of it, right? But we have a big influence. We can create conditions such that those things don't happen to us anymore, okay? So, but not like, it doesn't necessarily happen immediately. So if we have created lots of the causes and conditions for us to have certain experiences in our lives, like say, for example, we have very difficult relationships. So, you know, continuously we keep trying to create relationships, you know, that are positive for us in our lives, whether it's, you know, a partner or, you know, a family or a business relationship. And we keep coming up against the same difficulties. Part of it could be because of how we are creating that situation. We could have an attitude that that anticipates or expects people to act in that way. Okay, so that could be part of it. That we have, we create, even not necessarily consciously, the situation to experience that again. Like maybe we don't see the signals that we shouldn't be trusting this person. Maybe we trust people who aren't worthy of our trust, right? Now, we can grow in that way now, right? We can start to learn, like, what, you know, we can analyze the situations that we had, like, what, how could I have done this differently? How could I have, you know, anticipated that this person was going to cheat on me? How could I have, you know, seen what we call the red flags, right? Sometimes we can control it and we can start to change it that way. Okay. Sometimes, even if we've done that and we have, you know, looked as carefully as possible and tried to choose very well our relationships, it may still happen. And that's because we've created the cause for it in the past and isn't necessarily under our control yet. So then our way of responding it is to recognize that right now I can't change this, but in the future I can treat others differently. So if others are cheating on me, you know, even though I have, you know, I don't see it, but people still cheat on me. Maybe I'm, you know, trying to be as insightful as possible and choose very well, but I still get cheated on. I can recognize that I cheated on others. Like, I created the causes in the past to have this same experiences. And now I need to be as kind, as trustworthy as possible in my life so that this situation can stop happening to me. So do you see those two things that I talked about?
Okay, no, but past, you mean this life, or maybe past meaning another life?
Could be another life. Yep, could be. From a Buddhist point of view, that's possible. Yes.
Okay, because what happens is that when the same kind of situations happen and you have, you know, you get pain through it, you end up having a negative thought. You know, you actually start feeling it's going to happen again.
Right.
So,
right. So that's the part that you can control right now. How are you responding to it? How are you letting go of it? How are you forgiving others? How are you forgiving yourself? You know, how are you moving on? And then sometimes it may still happen, but by doing this opposite thing of being the trustworthy person, you start to create the causes to bring positive relationships into your life.
okay.
And you get rid of that past karma.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's stop there. And I'm going to turn it over to Felipe, and we're going to do some meditation for the last 15, 20 minutes. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So let's get started with the meditation, and I want you all to go back to a comfortable position, a posture that you can sustain for a decent amount of time during this session. And just find yourselves as grounded and stable as possible, mainly keeping your back upright, loosely upright, not tensing up, but also not sinking in the posture or slouching. And give yourself a moment to settle down. And let the sound of the bell bring you into the space of the body first. Bringing the awareness to the point of contact between your body and the cushion, the chair, the floor. Just become aware of this area where your body is in contact. Feel its weight. Feel the pressure that it exerts against the surface. Noticing how your body is something solid. Connecting in this way with the earth element present within, which signifies that solidity. And landing in this way in the space of the body, allow the awareness to become grounded. And then simply expand that awareness to cover the entire space of the body. And taking a moment to connect with this realm of physical sensations, which is an aspect that we're sometimes disconnected of. In our daily lives, we don't necessarily pay attention to the body. If it's not in pain or discomfort, we're usually just oblivious of the body itself. So now you can use the opportunity to actually become very aware of the physical sensations that arise. There are so many hundreds of thousands of biochemical processes going on right now in the body. Try to notice if you can become aware of some of them. Physical sensations such as hot or cold, a feeling of tingling, itchiness, comfort, discomfort, pressure, movement. Simply observe without judging. Experience your body. And now we go into the process of settling the body down into its natural state, a state of dynamic equilibrium, of balance. And to do this in a brief manner, we can simply give ourselves the luxury of 3 very deep breaths, inhaling all the way in with the in-breath, and then gently letting go, releasing the breath. And with the breath, also release all tension and tightness, let it dissolve. Breathing in fully and letting go. Breathing in peace and calmness. Breathing out worries and concerns. And with that third out breath, just let go of all control. Let go of controlling the breath and the body and simply stay with that relaxation, that calmness. Take a few seconds to observe it, to simply experience. And from this state of calmness and relaxation, we gently let go of observing the body or the breath. And letting go of this realm of physical sensations, we go into the space of the mind where thoughts and mental images arise. So for this meditation, simply try to stay with the words and to contemplate on the meaning. And we will be doing a meditation on gratitude. And gratitude celebrates our connection with other people and our capacity to offer kindness and mutual support. Sincere gratitude makes us feel recognized, encouraged, and inspired. It gives us confidence that we have the capacity to repay the kindness of others. And it leaves a pleasant, warm feeling in the heart. Gratitude is grounded in wisdom, which accepts that we are neither independent nor self-sufficient. It calls us to strip away unnecessary complexities and to be simple and natural with each other. Thinking of gratitude, try to get a feeling of how it energizes you. Appreciation feels good. So in order to give rise to this awareness, start by being grateful for all the good things that you experience in your life. You can begin with physical things, material things, such as your home or possessions or the surroundings you're in right now. Recalling how many people don't have any of these things and that you yourself may not always have them. Take a moment to rejoice in your good fortune, giving rise to a sense of appreciation. And then you can start to appreciate some less tangible things. Going through mentally through things such as your relationships, being healthy, having freedom or knowledge, experiencing a sense of thankfulness and appreciation for each of the good things in your life. And now turn your mind to the many people who have been kind to you in the past. Try to recall relatives, friends who were supportive or kind to you when you were young. Remember the teachers who showed us how to read or write, the people who inspired you to learn. Try to focus on as many specific events of kindness that you have experienced. And from your heart, take the opportunity to thank all those who have shown you so much kindness. And now turn your mind towards your parents, regardless of your relationship with them. We have to acknowledge that without the coming together of our mother and father, we wouldn't have the life that we have right now. This is something to accept and to be grateful for as well. To be able to acknowledge the role that others play in our lives. And perhaps if you feel more drawn towards other people than your parents, if you have a main caregiver, you can simply think of that person. The point is to give rise to this mind of gratitude, which accepts that we depend so much on others and their kindness. Take a moment to think how vulnerable we were when we were young. As a child, there's very few possibilities of surviving, if not due to the kindness of others. People certainly took care of you, nourished you, gave you food, shelter, love. It is because of all of those things that we managed to survive, to grow, and to thrive. So take this opportunity to say thank you from your heart to those people who made it possible. And even as adults in this very moment, we also depend on the kindness of others. Even the fact that we're holding this live session, the computer that I'm using, the table that the computer is on, none of these things were built or created by me. The clothes that we wear, the things that we have all around us, they came from the kindness and the effort and the work that others have put into it. Even if you purchase these things, it doesn't mean that they just appear out of nowhere. There's always people behind the things. There's always someone to be grateful towards. So try to expand that awareness, not only to encompass your direct circle of love, the people who are close to you, but make it broader to even include strangers, people that you may never know or meet in this life. And yet, we depend on so much. We rely on others, and we can be thankful for them and their work. And see how this love and kindness that you have received in your life depends on similar love and kindness that all the other people have received. Everyone at one point is the recipient of the kindness of others. Try to connect with this network, this chain of kindness going back infinitely. And see if from your own heart you can develop a wish to repay and pass on this vast kindness. And to the best of your ability, try to keep this awareness, this mind of gratitude within your heart so that it pervades your daily life as well, so that anyone that you encounter or that any interactions that you have with other people, you keep in mind how connected we are and how everyone around us, in one way, is giving us so much kindness and support. And now, for a minute, just let all conceptual thoughts, all images dissolve. Let go of the doing energy of the mind. For a moment, simply be with everything as it is. Just relax in the clear nature of your own mind. Slowly and gently coming out of the meditation, becoming aware of your body and your surroundings. And now we go into the final aspect of any practice within Buddhism, having set a proper motivation in the beginning and having gone through the teachings and the practice, we have generated certainly some positive potential, some good energy. And we want to share it with others as well. We don't keep this good energy to ourselves. And for that, we do the dedication. And particularly in these difficult times, perhaps, people who are struggling with difficulties of body and mind, people who are sick, people who are definitely affected by this situation with the coronavirus, and bringing them to mind, try to offer from your heart this merit, this positive potential to them, so that thinking that by the virtue of our good actions, their suffering might be dispelled. So take a moment to offer in whichever way you feel comfortable and to share this merit with others, making it a point to make this dedication expansive so that the world benefits at large. Okay. I am muted you,
Okay.
Venerable Drolma, if you want to add
Yes.
something.
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming and staying. And we'll see you tomorrow, same time. Come back.
Thank you, everyone. See you. I'm very excited for this. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you all so much.